wives, submit to your own husbands, as is fitting in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and do not be bitter toward them.
Thank you, Marty. How do we see this passage? And how do we see God's design for man and woman?
I see it as a partnership.
I do too.
I think, personally, I have trouble with the word submission.
Thank you.
However, I do believe that Christians should submit themselves to everyone, a man or a woman, because we need to be humble, right? And it's kind of consider others better than yourself. That's a basic principle, and I totally agree with that. But the word submission has been so poorly exercised.
I think part of that goes into what God said to Eve, your desire will be for your husband and your husband will rule over you. I think that it's been abused to where men are more powerful and they think it's their right to be above their wife and command their wife, which isn't what Jesus Christ showed us at all. And so I think that, there's kind of a rebellion to that, but I also think that as women, and all this stuff of having women believe that they're a solo agent and they don't need a man and you can be the man and all that stuff kind of plays into these things as well, to where the woman was made for the man. And I do believe that in God's design, the woman is a helper for her husband, a partner, someone, man and woman are unique and different, and they both bring a lot of value to the table that I think too often we see as, can see as negative, when God's design was really a really beautiful thing. Men, what have you found when your wife is a good support to you and a good partner? And I'd love to hear from the men.
Dad is right, as everyone knows, but what Mom says always goes.
But
Jerry knows that.
But if you only look at the word submit, we women get defensive. I know I do.
Subservient.
But if you look at the other verses that it refers to, that word submit doesn't mean we're supposed to just sit silently and have a man just pound over us.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that.
Yeah.
But if you just take the word submit, oh yeah, don't.
There's so much cultural baggage to this whole discussion.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to carry it out in an appropriate context. And we could have spent the whole quarter on this topic. We would do well, actually. I think that we can find out what's appropriate in our relationships by exploring the relationships. If we bring in this, and I've seen it, you've probably seen it too, this idea which comes from a cultural heritage, not from a Christian heritage, where the man is in charge of everything, has a final word on everything, the kids and the children. I'm speaking of a specific instance that I know very well outside my family. That really doesn't work. And and you can find that out in a hurry. But it's a topic that we need to explore in the Spirit and find out what are the benefits that can be derived from this relationship. What could Paul possibly mean when he talks about wives just submitting to their husbands? And then he follows it up with, husbands, address your wives like Christ addressed the church. Well, you look at the way Christ treats the church. He's not bossing the church around. Sometimes we wish he would. We have problems with this idea of submission in the context of our relationship to Christ. Some people feel that, I can't make any plans. I just have to, God has to reveal everything that I do at every moment, every thought that I should have, and I'm just an automaton, and I need somehow to get linked to the head who can just tell me what to do all the time. But to us, nourishes us, nurtures us, and grows us into all that we can be. And I think couples, both husband and wives, should do that to each other. And we're not the same. And we explore those differences in our relationship as it goes along. But like anything else, it needs to be a living, vital thing, not a collection of rules and strictures and a competition. Yeah, there's all these different contexts that are not healthy, that we're more familiar with than the context of Christ's love.
You also have to remember what Paul was. He was half Roman, half Jew. Both cultures, women were submissive. Both the Roman women and the Jewish women took orders from the boss, the husband. So that's where he came from.
Yeah, women's rights are a little bit different.
And I had a Sunday school teacher tell me, when I asked him, I says, how come, women don't wear hats in our church? Because Paul said your head should be covered. He said Paul hated women.
Well, that's
He
not my
didn't
favorite
hate
answer.
But you're lower than me.
Yeah.
You're subservient.
I'm gonna politely disagree with that. Paul has been very, very mistranslated. And I think when we all get to heaven, Paul is gonna be very chagrined at how his writings were very, very mistranslated and misapplied, particularly starting probably within the first 200 to 300 years of the church. What Paul is actually doing in his writings is turning the paradigm and the current social structure inside out and upside down, because he's saying ultimately we are in Christ and Christ is our model, and we are all supposed to be in this dynamic of being embedded in Christ. If we look at the model of the Trinity, that's our relational dynamic, right? That Jesus would put himself in human form and still be God, but be submissive to the will of the Father, to a plan that was foreordained before the failure in this world. That's the model of relational submission we are supposed to be hidden in. Meaning, God the Father, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit designed this plan as 3 in 1 before sin even happened. And Jesus submitted to that, to the Garden of Gethsemane, to the cross, to a death that he didn't see through. That's the second death. He didn't know he was going to be resurrected. That's the form of submission, and we're all called to it. So a better word is, let's be mutual. Let's have some mutuality in our relational dynamic, because that's how God is. And we were created to be in a relational dynamic of mutual.
I like the word loyalty, because that's like a choice, and it's a privilege, and it's, the more loyal you are to each other, the more you benefit. It's just, I don't see any negative connotations to being loyal. If you choose not to be loyal, we know that it comes with consequences that aren't men and women being different is that, and also coming from different cultures and backgrounds, is we help each other let go of some of the coping mechanisms we built as a child in our own family and start to bring them down. Because in my relationship with God, I've come to realize, like, I can go to God with anything because He already knows it all. Like, God already knows all the horrible things I've done. So I can try to hide it from Him, but He already knows. And He doesn't know me in that same way. So there's a different element of rejection. I go to God and know that what I'm telling Him, He already knows. He already has a plan. He already can help me out with all of it. So there's nothing that I really get scared to hold back from God. But in our human relationships, it's a little bit scarier, and the, you know, the submitting, the intimacy, the bringing your walls down. But with God, I believe that God kind of helps you get rid of your coping mechanisms. Like, part of dying to self is dying to the things that you're using to protect yourself and laying it bare so that God can really show you His design. And that's a hard thing to do in relationships with people, in our communication, in our boundary setting, in our fears and our forgiveness. And God gave us the union of man and woman to kind of help us learn how to love in this finite, limited structure, to prepare us for the eternal love that we're going to approach. Okay, let's read Ephesians chapter 5, 22 through 25, and verse 33.
What's the Bible verse?
Ephesians chapter 5, verses 22 through 25.
Ephesians what?
It's Ephesians 5,
Yes.
22 through 25.
I'll read it.
Okay, thank you.
Wives, submit yourself unto your own husband, as unto the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, and He is the Savior of the body. Therefore the church is subject unto Christ, so let the wives be to the husband in everything. However, let your wife, even as Jesus Christ also loved the church and gave Himself for it, that He might sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of water by the word, that He might present it to Himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such things, as that it should be holy and without blemish. So ought men to love the wife as their own bodies.
Thank you.
He that loves his wife loves himself. For no man ever yet hates his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, even as the Lord loved the church. For we are members of His body, and of His flesh, and of His bones. As for the cause, shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall be joined unto his wife, and the two shall be of one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church.
And then one more, 33.
Yeah. Nevertheless, let every one of you in particular so love his wife even as himself, and the wife say that she reverence her husband.
Thank you, David. Yeah, so I'm glad you read it ahead, because there's some good things in here. When the husband's supposed to leave his father and mother and become one with his wife, the dynamic that, as I've been studying, I believe is God's dynamic, is the husband and wife. God is number one, and then your next priority is your spouse, your husband or your wife, and then your children, and then extended family. I know in mine and Eddie's marriage, we have made our children number one for the first section of our life, and we put each other on the back burner because we both have a million other things to do. And it doesn't really build your relationship. And like, life gets super busy, we need to find a way to prioritize God each day.
think we need to go back to this idea again that Paul was giving specific guidelines for how to function in their current situation in view of something better that could be developed through this dynamic as people explore relationships in Christ. I mean, we're going to see that with his advice to the slaves. He wasn't establishing slavery for the rest of history there. He was just saying, here's how you can introduce Christ in your current environment. You know, you don't have to run out and preach like I do. You can stay where you are and perform in a way that is going to be a witness to everybody around you. You know, slaves, quit griping about your master. Slaves, quit subverting and stealing and all these things that discontented people are, you know, do to their taskmasters. Don't serve your taskmaster, but serve Christ. And I just pushed the lesson forward to the next lesson.
No, and I
But
appreciate
it's the same deal, right? It's the same deal.
Well, and skipping ahead, and then we'll go back. What did Joseph do? Remember the story of Joseph? He became slave of slaves. He was sold into another culture. He didn't know the language. He had every right to be bitter and play victim and see his life as being not great. I mean, his dad favored him, but his siblings hated him. His mom died in childbirth with his brother. And, you know, he had a couple dreams, and then he gets sold into slavery. And we can tell, if you look at Joseph's story, time and time again, he built that relationship with God and had the character of God. There's no way that he went from a slave to second in command in Egypt without the character of God. He was serving, he trusted God, he was trustworthy. Like, there's no way that he kept coming into these high positions. In Potiphar's house, he was in a high position. In jail, he was in a high position. And then next to the Pharaoh. And why? Because he was trustworthy, because he didn't complain, he served. I guarantee we can go through the character of God, and I guarantee Joseph had those elements in him. There's no way, he wasn't just lucky, like, oh, Joseph's blessed by God, we're just going to put him in there. He's horrible to work with, total pain in the butt. He doesn't listen, but we're just going to keep putting him in high stations. Like, no. The whole character of God turns you into a servant. You're happy in any situation because it doesn't matter what situation you're in. You have a relationship with God and you understand your worth in God and you understand other people's worth, where it's not about your station, it's about serving each other. No? Yeah. Okay. Moving on. Some men quote, "Wives, submit to your husbands," and stop there. But notice the important qualifier Paul adds, as is fitting in the Lord. Yes, also we need to remember that Paul's advice is not, the ideal is that the husband and wife are in harmony under God's direction. You know, this isn't just husband and wife, husband, you're over your wife, God's out of the picture, we're just gonna be total jerks to each other. Like, that's not what Paul's saying here. Nowhere does the New Testament teach that women are to submit to all men, nor that wives are subservient or subjugated, nor that they are to blindly submit to their husbands' every whim or desire. Paul's point is that the wife's loyalty is to the Lord first and to her husband second. The wife's individuality must not be swallowed up by her husband, nor can he act as her conscience. Christ's love for the church and giving himself up for her illustrates how husbands should love their wives. They will be faithful regardless of the cost. They will make decisions that are in the best interest of the wife, though normally these interests should be aligned. Love like this makes it easier for the wife to obey God's commands to respect her husband. A healthy Christian marriage is characterized by mutuality, consulting each other, thinking things through together, and making decisions as a couple. Sometimes when making decisions that have serious implications for the whole family, it may be appropriate to
Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it.
Thank you. And verse 15.
Foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. The rod of correction will drive it far from him.
What do you guys think about those two?
Never encountered those before, that's interesting.
Yeah, we were watching sermon last night on TV. We were watching.
YouTube, yeah.
I was thinking you were listening to it, but he made a point that when trying to understand the Bible, we need to take the whole Bible in context. Because there are definitely verses that are counted in one, from one place to another. And, so what is the bigger picture that God is
Well,
trying to get us to?
and in all things we need, as partners, to go to God in prayer over the choices we make. I think too often, sometimes as humans, we give advice and we kind of forget that God's part of the picture. We want to read the Bible, but then not actually go in prayer to God to see if He'll answer, which I find that He consistently does. Discipline. Does anyone have any discipline stories they want to share? Well, I will tell you that Edward is a little stinker. I love him.
Now, there's another shocker.
He is hilarious, but he is a little stinker. And sometimes I believe that he needs a good spanking. But we haven't really spanked him that much, and I think you can tell. I also don't think that, I've seen churches that take this to an extreme and abuse their children, which, like, where's the love in that? But I do believe that Solomon has a point. I think when kids are young, ages 0 to 6, if they know the boundaries, and if you go outside of this boundary, you're going to get a spanking from your father. I feel like that is oftentimes a bit of a correction that is healthy for kids. But it should be something that's done in prayer, and something that we are still working on with Edward. We may be missing the window. He's 5.
My youngest son, I spanked him one time.
Yeah, that's all it takes.
And I didn't spank him for what he did. I spanked him because he lied to me. And after I spanked him, I sat him down and I told him, I said, no matter what you do, you tell me the truth, I'll support you, I'll stand behind you. But if you lie to me, we're done.
Did that
You can't lie to me.
bring you guys closer together, or did it split you apart?
Both of my sons are 3.
But at the time when that happened, when he was younger,
Yeah, I mean,
don't
listen,
you think it
he understood.
increased your bond as father-son?
He understood that I didn't spank him for what he did. I
Mhm.
spanked him because he lied to me.
Yeah. And it probably helped him not lie, at least through his adolescent years.
No.
No? Okay, well, we'll see.
No, no.
Again,
Yes?
we have the same experience when we raise up our kids.
Uh-huh.
We have Raja and his sister.
Yeah.
But one thing that I remember when they, learning the piano, and then my wife always every morning wake them up from the bed, hey, come on, go practice. Sometimes, just pinch the ear or something. But now we can see now that it's working after that when they grow up, and then it's for them, not for us as parents, but for them when they grow up.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah, well, and it's boundaries and expectations. Kids need boundaries. It's very healthy. They need to know what's okay and what's not okay, and there needs to be, they know what the consequence is ahead of time. And does God give us boundaries? Does God punish us just to be mean, or is he trying to disciple us and grow us up?
well, but one thing that I want to say, maybe because there is a different culture. Back home in our country, when parents, discipline their kids, it's nothing happening in our government or whatever in the society but here in US maybe we cannot do it the same thing.
Yeah.
That we-
Physical punishment, creates a big furor
do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. When he had placed his hands on them, he went on from there.
Anyone have any comments on this one? What do we think this implies or means with children? I just think of the disciples being like, Jesus is too busy. He doesn't have time to talk to the kids. He doesn't, the kids aren't important enough. They're not valuable enough.
And they were reflecting the mores of their
Culture.
right?
Well,
And Jesus was pushing back not just on his disciples, but on the mores of the culture.
well, and in culture too, like, do we understand how valuable our kids are? And the thing is like, feel like childhood, you're coming to understanding what the world is, how things work. It's a very pivotal, very, very important time for children to be introduced to God and who God is and the image of God. And we as parents are their image of God. We're their image of love. We teach them what love is and what love isn't. And kids are more perceptive than we give them credit for. I've been doing some therapy, some self-therapy, and a gentleman that God brought into my life a long time ago did like an intensive with me. And anyways, he just talked about how like when you're a child, you really don't have any boundaries yet. You can't have them. You're still developing into understanding what the world is. And he would draw, people as like a dot, because he said I can't draw, so he would do a dot. I went back and started going through my life, and instead of doing a dot, I drew myself as a heart. And I realized when you're born, you're born with this heart that is, pretty clean and pure. It doesn't really have any understanding of what love is or isn't. And then you come into life and you have your parents, you have your mom and your dad, and they are your model for how things work. And you model your parents in life. And you can really only model what you have. Some parents are very developed and established in teenage coping mechanisms, child coping mechanisms, and some parents mature into adult mechanisms. And, but anyways, you go through life, and so you're a child, you don't really know how to protect your heart. And so your heart starts getting bruised and beat up a little bit. And then as you come into a little bit older, if you have a parent to model that can do this, then you start to kind of put walls up and boundaries to protect your heart. And if you have an adult parent that's really good at communication and can really help you go through these things, you can keep developing, but otherwise you model a parent that's either kind of still in a childlike place or a teen-like place. So, and then when you get into your marriage, you come into your marriage and you have this heart that was either kind of bruised and damaged. This is something I realized. You either have a heart that's a little bit, you've got a couple bruises and wounds in there that you put inside of a box, or you have a heart that's been completely blown up and busted that you put inside of a box. And then you come into your partner and they bring their heart in its condition, either exposed or walled off. And then you try to build this love relationship with each other with these two hearts that have been kind of beat up through life and walled off, and wonder why you can't connect with people. And this is what we all are. We are all our heart and our life experience. And it relates into what we had with our parents as children, what we see God as, how we've related with people, and we build coping mechanisms through these things, and we bring them into our life, and it's how we deal with everything. And so God wants to help us set up healthy boundaries and heal the wounds in our heart and develop trust and grow in love. And I don't know how I got on that tangent, but kids, as kids, their heart, like the way we're treating them, the image that we are being for them, does a lot for how that heart's going to go into the world and connect with people and relate with people, and vice versa.
I would add to that model that when a child is born, they have a personality.
Yeah, they do.
So you've got that on top of it, and a personality that doesn't make sense of things the same way we do, or our other kids do, because, I just feel really strong. We think we have way more influence on our kids than we really have. And we need God's help because He's the only one that can touch their hearts deep.
personality out of your child.
Right.
And then on that clean slate, pour in what you consider to be righteousness. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but not very much in some cases about how children are treated in their families.
Yeah, and if you guys, when I started to find Jesus, I started gardening a little bit, and I have a grape plant that has made it. Most everything else has not. But, and I'm horrible at pruning because I don't know how to do it, and it hurts my feelings to cut off parts of the tree and whatever.
It's supposed to, initially.
I know, and I have this grape that actually has grapes, but it has gone crazy, and I've never pruned it, and I realized that's kind of how I deal with life. And so if you want to go into some psychology of yourself, garden, and you can kind of see how you treat things and where those strengths and weaknesses are. Okay, let's do Deuteronomy 6, verses 6 through 7.
And this word which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart. And thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when they lie down, and when they rise up.
So how often are we supposed to talk about these things with our kids?
So, like they say before, the parent is the role model for the kids first in the house, in the family. So, whatever that we do at home, that will be they will follow the parents because that's the role model for the kids when they stay at home.
Yeah.
This is a commentary on the nature of the law as much as on the training of children. The law wasn't given to tell you exactly what to do in every circumstance. The law is a description of how things will function optimally, at least within the cultural context. And we gain wisdom by exploring that law. How does it apply in this situation? And talking about this to your kids, well, it's not just talking about, it's demonstrating. Say, well, okay, kids, we're going to recite the 10 Commandments again today, and we'll have discussed the law. No, they know the 10 Commandments, they learn this stuff fast, but the big question is, what does it mean? How do you apply it? How do my parents relate to the law? And that's the wisdom that we need to gain through life. That's the wisdom that we want to enable our children to gain through life.
I think one of the biggest things when you're raising kids, don't just sit down and talk to them about all that stuff, be an example.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think too, it's a lot like math. We can go and, show someone a times table, have them memorize it, but there's a difference between knowing the answer and knowing math. Like working the problem, knowing how the numbers work together, how things come together is very different than just men don't even want to get married anymore. There's this whole confusion between what a man is and what a woman is, and then there's this whole attack on kids to where they're gonna, am I a man or am I a woman? And I'm too young to understand this, but I'm gonna go actually get surgery that's going to take away my God-given gift to create life, which is the greatest gift that God has given all of us. And you just look at it, you can see how Satan is, attacking the image of the man, the image of the woman, the family structure, like all of it. If you can get it to where the man and the woman won't even get married, then you've already taken down a lot of God's system. If you get the kids to where they can't even produce, they can't even create life, then they can't become a parent. Like for me, when I became a mom, it changed everything. And I think that happens a lot because the woman's brain actually is rewired during pregnancy. God built it so that, a woman goes through great change, and then a woman, I feel, has a different responsibility to her baby when they're first born, to where I feel like a lot of women I found God anyways, and I know I'm not the only one. I found God and then wanted to take my kids to church, and then tried to love and respect Eddie and our differences as best as I could, and I watched slowly a ripple effect in the way it changes things for the future. But going through that separation where we were both godless, and then I started going this path and a different one than him. He supported me. I gave him the space that I needed, and that's a lot of people don't give each other the support and love to make it through that part to where you actually get to a place where you can mend the bridge. As a father, fathers have a huge role in the spiritual upbringing of their children. I think God created the man first, and I do think there's a lot of things that the man holds that children really need, and mothers too.
The LDS Church a few years ago did a really interesting study on the family, and found that children that are faithful in church and in religion, with God, one of the key factors, not just that their parents were faithful, but they got to know other people that were Christians that confirmed what their parents were saying.
Oh yeah.
Relationships with other adults.
That would make sense.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And I think we need to take that responsibility more seriously.
Yeah. Well,
Because it really does take a village. To isolate yourself and your family, because we've seen this too. Because you want to, keep it pure, no outside influences, you isolate yourself. That's not a recipe for good things. But